Hi, this is the first video from the Southampton Regional Methodist Theology Forum. The group has been meeting about 3 times a year since 2017. These meetings were held at Sarum College in Salisbury up to the COVID dislocation in 2020, and latterly our discussions have been online, but this video covers a return to face-to-face meetings and was held in October 2021 in Romsey Methodist Church, which is now blessed with a suite of air purifiers. Our chair, as usual, is the Reverend Tom Stuckey, who is both formerly chair of the Southampton District and president of the Methodist Conference. And our speaker is Professor Meric Srokosz, who is based at the National Oceanography Centre in Southampton and a former associate director of the Faraday Institute for Science and Religion at Cambridge, and is also now a member of the National Committee for Christians in Science. He co-wrote the book Blue Planet, Blue God, The Bible and the Sea with Rebecca Watson, and his talk is based on that book. This is the first section of the talk considering Blue God. A second video concentrates on Blue Planet.
Great, thank you very much for inviting me. I have rather a lot of material, I realised when I looked at my talk last night, but this is the third talk I've given this week, so it's probably the least well prepared, so I apologise for that. So hopefully it'll make sense, and we'll go from there. Basically, it is based around the book that I wrote with my co-author Rebecca Watson, who's an Old Testament theologian. I've done New Testament Greek, but I haven't done Old Testament Hebrew, so I needed somebody who knew about the Old Testament to do some of this, because a lot of the stuff about the ocean is in the Old Testament. So let's press on. So Blue Planet, if you look at the Earth from above the Pacific, you would be hard-pressed to know there's any land here. You can just about, I think that's California or North America up here. I think that might be New Zealand and Australia down just on the limb. But, you know, from some aspects in space, or views from space, you'd be hard-pressed that we have any land on the planet. And the Earth is 71% covered by water. One of the reasons we call the book Blue Planet, Blue God was because obviously the Blue Planet programs with Richard Attenborough. What we didn't know at the time was that Blue Planet 2 was coming out, which actually came out about the same time the book was published, which was fortuitous, or God's timing, depending on your perspective. And actually that probably helps our sales of our book. So Blue Planet was the original program, and then Blue Planet 2 came out at about the same time as we published the book. Why Blue God? So Blue God, there's a lot of stuff written on what I would say is called green theology about looking after the environment and so on, but it's all written from a terrestrial perspective. Little is written from a sort of oceanographic perspective, and as an oceanographer, I wanted to think about that issue, hence the Blue Theology, Blue God title. And I also think, as I look at Scripture and I think about what we're doing to the planet, that I think God might also be blue in the terms of sad, or disappointed in how we as his creatures are treating his creation. So that was the sort of resonance behind the title. So here's a little quiz for you to get you going. So there are 3 pictures here. That's me, a younger version of me stood on the back of our research ship. That's one of my colleagues with a computer. There's a man swimming with dolphins. So which one is the odd one out? If you've heard me talk before, you will have possibly seen this, so you're not allowed to say. But I'll get you to vote in a minute. Which is the odd one out, A, B, or C? I'll give you a minute to think, and then we'll vote. So who thinks A is the odd one out? Hands up. Okay. Yep. B? So one vote for A and B. C? No. Okay, so the majority think C is the odd one out. Why do you guys think C is the odd one out? That's our possible answer. In fact, this was taken on board ship. We were actually on board the ship. We were doing some computations and then we were using the data we were acquiring to make computations of what was happening and then changing our strategy for observing the ocean. In fact, A is the odd one out, which Ian got right, and the reason for that is that I don't swim with whales and dolphins. Which is when I talk to a lot of people about oceanography, they think it's about swimming with whales and dolphins, which it isn't. And B, so these two were actually both taken at sea, both involving, I was on this cruise, I was the chief scientist, and this is one where I was younger. The reason we wear the orange suits on deck is if you fall in the North Atlantic, your survival time is a few minutes. And if you don't wear, so if you're wearing a suit, you might survive long enough for the ship to turn around and spot you. And the reason it's orange is because they can find you in the water more easily if you're orange. So Ian was the only one with the correct answer, which is not surprising, given he's an oceanographer. So a bit about me. I started my career as an applied mathematician, actually working on alternative energy, wave power in the 1970s. I think most people in the room here are old enough to remember the oil crisis of the 1970s, and wave power, alternative energy became a thing. And then the government, beloved Margaret Thatcher of late lamented memory, sorry, political statement, decided that we had all this North Sea oil, so there wasn't really any point in having alternative energy, which is a bit of a pity in retrospect. Had we invested in the 70s, we'd have been in a good place now. So I did that in the 1970s. Then I moved to the Oceanography Centre, well, its predecessor as it happened, and worked on waves, and then generally got interested in broader aspects of oceanography. I work on something called rapid climate change at the moment, which is to do with the ocean circulation. Like Ian, I've worked on using satellites to observe the ocean. I continue to do that. And I'm interested in the effects of physics on biology on plankton. From 2012 to 2015, I was also the Associate Director at the Faraday Institute for Science and Religion in Cambridge. If you're interested in science and religion issues, look them up. There's masses of material online that you can download, free resources, talks, everything. And of course, as a Christian, I'm interested in relating my faith to my work. So this is the context in which I think about what we're doing to the planet. God's story and Earth's story. The Bible is essentially God's story. It's about God. And all good stories have a beginning, middle, and an end. And the Earth story is no different. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And in Revelation, we read there'll be a new heaven and the earth. So if you like, those are the bookends of the story of the earth embedded in the story of God. And we're living in the middle of the story, and what we're doing affects God's creation. So when we were researching the book, came across an interesting character called St. Brendan the Navigator. I don't know whether some of you have heard of him. This is one of his prayers. Shall I abandon, O King of Mystery, the soft comforts of home? Shall I turn my back upon my native land and turn my face towards the sea? Shall I then suffer every kind of wound the sea can inflict? Shall I take my boat across the wide, sparkling ocean? O Christ, help me on the wild waves, which is a prayer I identify with, having spent some of my career bouncing around in force 12 storms in the North Atlantic. But he was an interesting character, St. Brendan. It's not clear whether he actually did this. There's some evidence that he actually made this journey because Tim Severin, I don't know if you've heard of Tim Severin, he reconstructs old craft and then tries to recreate journeys. And he took this boat, which is built to the same spec that St. Brendan would have had 1,500 years ago. And the description of the voyage suggests that he may have made it as far as North America. There's a description of somebody throwing large boulders at them and sort of a smith or something like that on a large scale. They think that would be Iceland with an eruption of the volcano. There's crystal cathedral, crystal columns that he encounters, which could well have been icebergs off Newfoundland. So there's some evidence they actually managed to do this journey and all the way back in this boat. Severin did that journey. Interesting character, St. Brendan. Sorry, that's a by-the-by, nothing of great importance. What do you think of when you think about the Bible and see? Any thoughts? What comes to mind? Come on, you're a bunch of ministers, you should be able to come up with something. Sorry?
They were frightened of it.
They were frightened of it. Interesting point, we'll come back to that one. Sorry? Leviathan, yep. Come back to that one as well. Chaos, yep. I'm not going to talk about that very well. I will talk about it briefly, yep. Anything else?
The story of Noah.
Yep. Noah, any other things come to mind? Jonah, yep. Sea of Galilee, yep. Okay, so because you're an educated audience, you've come with more educated guesses in the sense of chaos and all these other Leviathan and so on. Most people come up with Noah, obviously, Jonah and the big fish, the boat, Jesus' disciples sinking in the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus walking on water. Those are more common responses from possibly less theologically educated audiences. So I want to deal with some misconceptions about what the Bible says, and one misconception is the Bible has little to say about the oceans, which is where actually Rebecca and I started out. We thought it would be quite an easy book to write. There's not that much in the Bible about the oceans, but actually it turned out there was a lot, so it took us a while. So these are the chapters in the book: sea and salvation, sea and spirituality, God of all the sea, human creatures and life at sea, the sacred sea, coping with chaos and uncertainty, vast and vulnerable sea, economics, hubris and human community, which is travel and trade. So actually, I'm not going to talk about all of those, there isn't time. So I've picked out some things that are of hopefully interest and engaging. But there's a lot about the sea in the Bible, and if you want to read more, buy my book, which I'm selling at half price. Some basic facts. So the ocean covers 71% of the earth, I've already said that. It's 4 kilometers deep on average, and its greatest depth, which is the Marianas Trench, is 11 kilometers deep, which is a deeper depth than Mount Everest is high. Mount Everest is 9 kilometers roughly. So there's a big hole in the ocean, equivalent to Mount Everest, really, on land. The top 3 meters of the ocean hold as much heat as the entire atmosphere. So in other words, that's because the water has a high heat capacity, so it can hold heat much more easily than air. So we'll come back to that point as well. The ocean produces about 50% of the world's primary production. That's new biomass through photosynthesis. That's with the phytoplankton in the water. And in fact, I think that means that it produces about 50% of the oxygen in the atmosphere. Because just like the plants on land, the plants in the ocean use carbon dioxide and expire oxygen. 10% of the world's population depends on fisheries for their jobs, and about 4.3 billion people are reliant on fish for their animal protein intake, or at least a significant fraction of their animal protein intake. Another misconception that we came across is that the Bible views the sea in negative terms, which is also not true. I'm greatly encouraged as an oceanographer to see that in Genesis, God gathered the waters in one place, called them the seas, and saw that it was good. So I'm studying a good part of God's creation. Similarly, he put creatures in the water. The waters teem with living creatures, and if you've ever been to sea, you'll see there are a lot of creatures. I'll show you a picture later to illustrate this point. And they were considered good, and they were told by God to increase, be fruitful, and multiply. So I feel as a oceanographer, I'm studying a part of God's good creation, and the Bible sees the creation in positive terms. Another misconception that often people have is that the Bible views creation as having been made for the benefit of us human beings, which is obviously not true either.